Welcome to Ricardo Questions, where I always question the narrative. All right, let's get into it. A Florida mom puts an OnlyFans sticker on her car. A Christian school expel her kids. A California mom makes six figures a month on the same platform. A Catholic school expel her three sons. A 56-year-old woman in a small town becomes a top OF creator. Her hometown finds out and turns on her. Same pattern, different places, kids and reputation caught in the middle, unfortunately. But the more I look into these three stories, the more I realize this isn't just an argument about OnlyFans. It's part of a much bigger argument, which is individual freedom versus social order. How much freedom should an adult have to live the life that they choose? And when those choices collide with family, religious school, a church, or an entire community where those individual freedom end and the responsibility to other people begin. Because having the right to make a choice doesn't mean that choice happens in isolation. On the other side, believing that someone's choices have consequences doesn't automatically mean that every consequence is justified. That's the tension running through all of the three of these stories. We're going to walk through these three cases and look at the numbers and people used to explain why this keeps blowing up, and then get into the bigger question underneath it all. Well, first case is Florida. Let's take a look.
An update now to the Florida mother who was forced to drop her kids off across the street from their school because of a sticker on her car promoting her OnlyFans account. Her two kids have now been expelled from their private Christian school.
Why not take the decal off?
And that would seem like an easy thing to say, for sure. But for me, it supports my family. This provides a very comfortable way of life for us. And it's legal. I pay taxes just like everyone else.
The school sent a letter terminating their enrollment, accusing her of promoting a pornographic website, but still offering the possibility to re-enroll her kids if she removes the decal.
February 5th, the school sends a letter, and the two kids are expelled effective immediately. Wow. They say that she was producing and advertising pornography. They cite Florida language about showing that kind of material around minors. They also claim that she put on a bigger mocking decal and talked to the media. She says that the bigger decal story isn't what they think, and she didn't go to the press first. But watch the order here. They told her to move the car. She moved the car, and then the kids got expelled, unfortunately. All right. Now let's transition to the second case, Crystal Jackson. Same fight, Catholic school, and three sons. Let's take a look.
I have quite a few new fans, especially because some of the moms found out and they weren't too happy.
She claims dads in her community are some of her newest fans and says her online nude videos on OnlyFans generate up to $150,000 a month. She and her husband claim unhappy school moms bullied Sacred Heart Parish to kick out her three sons, all under 12, over it. But an unhappy fellow parent who didn't want her name used tells us Jackson has put us all in the difficult position of having to explain to our young sons and daughters why a mother in their community would choose to become a sex worker and sell her body. In fact, we wanted to know what Crystal and Chris Jackson told their own boys.
Is someone going to say, or they're going to overhear something at school at this point? I don't want them surprised, like, what do you mean? So we told them, your mom's an internet model.
Now CBS 13 has learned the kids were expelled 3 weeks ago. Another family now caught in this Sacred Heart scandal.
So apparently in this scenario, someone went looking, printed out the OF pictures, and walked into the Catholic school. And Jackson is basically saying, take her down if you want, but leave the kids out of it. Fair enough. She also told her sons that she's an internet model, so that way they don't hear it first in school. But the other parents' line is the complete opposite. Now they have to explain to their kids why there's a mom in a community sexualizing herself. As you can see, it's the same collision as Cline. Private religious school, legal adult work. The students are the ones who get moved, right? Same results. The kids are out. 2 schools and 2 denominations, unfortunately. Now let's transition to our third and final case, which is Rae Richmond, who's been outed by her community. Let's take a look.
Hi. I'm curious about your story. How did this work? People evidently who in your neighborhood found you miraculously, because if they would judge you for these sites, they, of course, would never be looking at them.
Exactly. I'm really not sure how it happened, to be honest. I just know that one day, people back in my hometown, I come from a really small town, and they started posting about it on social media. And some people were tagging my real name and my fake name, because obviously this is a stage name, but they were tagging those two names together and just outing me to everybody, talking about what a terrible person I was. I heard how I was going to go to hell and I was serving Satan and all these crazy things that are definitely not true. So it was quite a shock.
So in this scenario, they pretty much the community outed her and they're saying that she's a hypocrite. Well, let me explain. In her own essay, she says that she's a church-going Christian. Yeah, that's exactly what she said. And that's the reason why they're attacking her. Now, a few people did support her in private, but they asked her not to say so because they just don't want to become the next target. As you can see in this situation, there isn't some 8-year-old being kicked out of school. The punishment is reputation, unfortunately. Same move, they find the page, they attach the real name, and make the community enforce it. And those are the 3 OF stories. Now let's look at some of the numbers where people reach for when they try to explain why this keeps happening. As for the first data, it's pretty much showcasing the creator volume. Now, let me be very clear. These are estimates. They're not official OnlyFans account data. Just want to be very clear on that. California is number 1. Florida is number 3. That's not random for this video. Jackson is in California and Cline is in Florida. And Nevada leads per capita, which I'm not surprised because sex work is legal in Nevada. The point here is very simple. The two school stories are not happening in some tiny corner of the map. Now, as for the second data, who are the OnlyFans users and who is paying? Now, let me also be very clear on this data. This isn't peer review paper. Let me repeat myself. This isn't a peer review paper, okay? So don't treat this as a national head count. This is just an estimate. Just want to be very clear on that. What it found that the user group is about 63% male, about 69% white, and about 89% married. Hold that next to the Jackson case. Local news said dads in the community were some of her newest fans. Wow. The people who are screaming at the school gates and the people on the other side of the paywall, well, they're not always different populations. They aren't. And the fight always gets framed as mom versus the church. But the customer in the study is often a married man. It is what it is. Now, this is where the conversation gets a little bit more complicated, okay? What happens when something that used to be socially marginal becomes normalized and accessible to millions of people? Listen to what I just said. What happens to dating, marriage, families, and sexual norms? That is the downstream question, and that brings me to Michael Sartain. Take a look for yourself.
Okay, I want you to consider this, okay? I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little less cynical for 5 seconds here, a little less sarcastic. There are 1.4 million OF creators in the United States right now. Between the ages of 21 and 40, there are, I want to say, 48 million women. Okay. There's 1.4 million. There are 500,000 working prostitutes in the United States right now. Let's say half those prostitutes are actually OF creators as well. So we're going to say there's something like 1.6 million girls that are somewhere in the sex industry. Porn, we'll just throw that in there, but that's going to be like not quite as much. So we're getting to the point where it's like something like 3 or 4% of women between the ages of 20 and 40 are on OF. And if they're attractive, that number goes up to like 5, 6, 7. You're telling me 1 in 17 women I see is in sex work? Do you think that this isn't going to have downstream ramifications? You think that you wonder why the marriage rate is plummeting? This is crazy. And everything I said, I can back up with statistics, and I will get skewered for it. I will get canceled for it. I will get ratioed for it. I will be called insecure.
I am just glad all these women are, getting empowered.
For sure.
That's all.
I think we should talk about the ratio of OnlyFans women versus actual working prostitutes. You said 1.4 million and
illegal.
500,000?
Illegally working girls.
Illegally.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be 50%.
There isn't even
I
100,000
just
legal
feel like-
working girls.
I feel like OnlyFans is the definition of work smarter, not harder.
Again, I'm not.
what you're
I'm not.
saying?
Again,
I think
not
because-
disagree. It's a definition of economics. My point is, you cannot then and not expect there to be downstream ramifications. There has to be. If every man all of a sudden just went virtual and started playing video games for money, eventually the roads would break down. Eventually, we wouldn't have infrastructure. If somehow every guy could make 500 grand from playing video games, we'd end up in a situation like that. There's a lot of women right now. No offense to you guys, because I love you guys, who are on OF, who could have been surgical nurses, who could have been doctors, who could have been real estate agents, who could have been real estate developers, and they chose to take themselves out of the market. I'm not saying they're wrong. They're making more money. From their standpoint, 100% they should do what they're doing. What I'm saying is that has downstream ramifications for the entire country.
All right, let's break that down. I want to be very clear on something. A lot of the time when Sartain is making an analytical argument, he tries to back it up with data. So I don't think he's just talking out of his ass in this clip. I don't. There is something worth discussing here, but I still have my caveats, but we'll get to that later. OnlyFans is not some tiny niche anymore. It isn't. If enough women are participating, especially the ones who can actually make money doing it, you don't get to automatically assume that the rest of the culture stays frozen. Sartain ties that to the broader shift to marriage, birth rates, male and female behavior. And he says that he gets called insecure for even bringing some of this up. There are uncomfortable truths about male and female nature that our culture has a hard time talking about. And sometimes when someone brings those differences into a conversation about sex, dating, or relationships, people attack the person making the argument instead of dealing with the argument itself. But here's where I want to be very careful. I don't need to accept every number in that 2-minute clip to think that the broader question has merit. The numbers should still be evaluated, but don't dismiss the entire argument and just because you don't like the argument leads to, and take the bigger question seriously and then look at the numbers where it actually stand on. Well, let's take a look. As you can see here, the US fertility has been below replacement since 2007. That's real, but it's not one cause. It's housing, wages, people waiting on kids, childcare. So OnlyFans did not invent that. A lot of this was moving way before the app even existed. So here's the framing problem. OnlyFans can potentially contribute to the broader changes in relationships and sexual norms, definitely for sure, but it does not mean that OnlyFans caused the baby bust. Just saying. And by the way, I don't think Sartain is necessarily trying to say one app caused the entire decline. I don't really think so. So it is a short clip. It does sound that way, but then again, it is a short clip. But I do want to be objective here. So now, what is true is the churches and Christian schools see the bigger picture. Weaker marriage, falling birth rates, and changing sexual norms. An app where a mom can put herself online and sell explicit content and anybody with an internet connection can purchase it, to them, that is not just content. They see it as part of the larger cultural shift, one that threatens the household, traditional sexual norms, and their religious beliefs. If you don't understand that lens, then the expulsion letters sound insane to you. If you do understand it, you can still hate how they handled it. And this is where I think the arguments gets bigger than OnlyFans. Actually, there's a scene that I actually want to show you that I think that's relevant to this conversation. Take a look for yourself.
I mean it, Dean. What would you rather have? Peace or freedom?
What would you rather have? Peace or freedom? That line always stuck with me. It really did. Freedom doesn't guarantee happiness, and it doesn't guarantee justice, and it doesn't guarantee that people will make good decisions. It guarantees choice. And choice includes the freedom to make terrible decisions, decisions that sometimes affect people who never made those choices themselves. That's basically the culture war we're witnessing in America right now. At its core, a lot of this argument is about individual autonomy versus social order. On one side says, I'm an adult, it's my body, it's legal, I'm not forcing anybody to subscribe. Why should a church or a school or my neighbors get to dictate what I can do with my own life? There's truth to that. But the other side asks a different question. What happens when millions of individual choices start changing the culture around us? What happens to marriage, family, kids, schools, churches? What standards our communities are allowed to maintain? There's truth to that question too. This is where it gets complicated. The OnlyFans creator has autonomy. A woman has the freedom to create sexual content. But also a Catholic or a Christian school has religious freedom and the right to say that that violates the values of our institution. So what you're witnessing is two different groups exercising their freedom, and it's colliding with each other. And what the sad part of this is that the kids are caught in the middle. They didn't open an OnlyFans account. They didn't write the school's morality policy, but they're the ones who end up paying the price for decisions that were made by adults on both sides. On both sides. That's why I don't think this conversation is as simple as sex work is empowering or sex work is destroying society. The harder question is this: how much responsibility do you have for the downstream consequences of something you have every legal right to do? Because if I have the right to do this, therefore this is good for society, are not the same statement. And at the same time, saying someone's behavior has consequences doesn't automatically mean every consequence imposed on them or their children is justified. That's the tension. Private Christian school does not have to bless OnlyFans. That's their right. That's their freedom of religion. Those are their beliefs. But I also don't like the ostracizing either. And I especially don't like the children becoming collateral damage in a fight that they didn't create. These OF creators aren't kicking down anyone's door. You can reject the lifestyle without treating them like criminals. But I also have criticism for the OF creators. A mom who won't take an OnlyFans sticker off her car while she's driving her kids to school is irresponsible. And Jackson too, by the way. You open up an OnlyFans account and you put 3 kids in a Catholic school and you live in a family-oriented community where people know each other, well, sooner or later, somebody's probably going to find the page, which they did. And as for Rae, it was foreseeable that someone in a small church town eventually is going to connect your OF page to your real name. But foreseeability isn't the same thing as saying they deserve the backlash. Let me be very clear on that. Predicting a consequence is not the same thing as morally endorsing it. I can say you should have seen this coming while also saying people shouldn't have treated you that way. They shouldn't. So the pattern is the same. If you're in this line of work and you're still trying to stay tied to churches and Christian schools, you need to be realistic. Those places don't condone this behavior. That's how they work. You can practice your faith in your own way. That's your choice. And I'm not trying to turn this into a scripture debate. I'm really not. What I am saying is if you keep one foot in sex work and one foot in a community whose moral code rejects sex work, eventually those two worlds are going to collide. And that's where Sartain's bigger argument comes back into the picture. At an individual level, the question is, do I have the right to do this? Do I have the right to do this at the institutional level? My apologies. Does the school or church have the right to reject it? Let me say that again. Does the school or church have the right to reject it, and at the societal level? What happens when millions of individual choices collectively start changing the cultural norms? That is the downstream question. Sartain is pointing at a real cultural shift here. It will have effects, and we can't ignore it. Exactly how large those effects are, whether they're good or bad, is where people are going to disagree. And maybe that's why Cassio question works well here. Peace or freedom? Because freedom is messy. People make choices you hate. Religious institutions maintain the standards you hate. Communities react in ways you hate. The question isn't whether freedom comes with consequences. It does. The harder question is whether consequences are legitimate, who should bear them, and how much social order are we willing to impose in order to prevent them. That's the argument underneath all of these three stories. So if you're in this work and your kids happen to be in a Christian or Catholic school, use some goddamn common sense. Be discreet. Understand that they have religious beliefs, that they don't condone that type of behavior. You don't have to hate them for that, but you have to decide whether that school and that community is still the right fit, the life you've chosen. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I know that was a long one. That was a mouthful, but that's the end of the video. Until next time, take care and good luck out there. We're definitely going to need it.